Welcome, Nick. Welcome, Pamela.
Okay, 2 minutes to go. Usually takes us to about 12:03 to get critical mass for everybody to arrive. Big thanks to AIA San Francisco for hosting us, and Carson from their team, David Eschker from ArcSource, Dave Monk from ArcSource, and looking forward to today's topic. All right, hi Nick, Pamela, Brooke. Okay, so we're going to give another 3 minutes here to get started. Once we do, I'm going to have David put up a few polling questions just so we kind of get a picture of who's with us today. There'll be questions about firm size and some of the technologies that you use. It's good for us, even as I'm talking through the slides, to kind of have that context, especially on firm size. And yeah, a big welcome. I'm going to click forward on my slide to the next one. Today is disaster planning for architects and engineers. Yeah, this is the last week of May in our webinar series. This is our 5th webinar in May, and I'm going to show a slide in a couple minutes about upcoming topics we're going to be covering this summer. So we'll just give folks another minute or two to arrive. Hope you guys are doing well. Enjoying, I hope you had a good Memorial Day weekend. I know I did, and looking forward to the summer, although definitely here in the Bay Area, it feels like summer this week. Big shout out to one of our ArcSource client firms, David Baker Architects. They just got given the California Firm Design Award this year, so pretty happy for them. And yeah, so just another minute and then we'll get started. Okay, let's do this. I have a lot of slides and people will be able to catch up with us. Okay, so first of all, I want to start by thanking AIASF and their sustaining sponsors. The Sustaining Sponsors program is something that helps AIA San Francisco keep going with all of its programs for with some large donations at the gold, silver, bronze, copper level. We've definitely appreciated their support. If we were doing these as a lunch and learn seminar in person in the AIASF office, we'd get to interact with some of these firms and brands with programs and plaques and displays that they have there. So just want to acknowledge them and thank them. And also want to go over at this point the upcoming webinar series that we're going to continue through the summer. We've had a ton of people each week for the last 5 weeks. So today is disaster planning. I'm going to take the opportunity to dive into file sharing tools for architects. We're going to do 2 a month in June, July, and August. So file sharing tools, some Revit power tips. We're also going to look at Slack and Microsoft Teams collaboration. End of July, we're going to look at how to pick CAD BIM computers. This is a really interesting topic, and we've definitely done quite a bit of research ourselves on this, and excited to share with you what we've learned. Also going to pick up cybersecurity for architects again. And lastly, in late August, we're going to dive into project management tools for architects. So covered the file sharing and the project management at a very high level last week. and going to take the opportunity to dive deeper into those tools and areas. A lot of people ask a lot of questions around those, so excited to do that. This is the ArcSource team. Several of you know us. This is us all working from home. We are a group of IT professionals. We empower architects and engineers with best-in-class technology solutions so they can make great buildings. We're definitely working with a lot of firms, both large and small, and we really like to take care of strategy, security, infrastructure, and support so our clients can focus on the work that they do. Also, an interesting trend this spring, even here during shelter in place and COVID-19, is we've been working on helping several new design firms launch. And we've gotten some great national recognition in the last couple of years. A few of our clients on this slide, we've worked with over 300 architecture firms in the last 22 years, both large and small, as I said, and also been working at AIASF here as a allied member since 2006. And a little bit about myself. My background is in architecture. Sometimes I joke I'm a recovering architect. I used to work at TGH Architects in San Francisco, studied both structural engineering and architecture. And in the last couple of years, I've been really focused on the cybersecurity space and learning there and bringing what I'm learning to all of my clients. And then where I usually start these webinars is a slide on trends. And then the COVID-19 has been a big interrupt. And so today's topic is on disaster planning. And really, we've all taken the opportunity in this last 10 weeks or so to face a really kind of unexpected situation with COVID-19. But it's also inspired a lot of great conversations with my clients and ArcSource as we've been talking about business continuity. And really, when we talk about disaster planning, we're really talking about business continuity. And I like this graphic because the purpose of disaster planning is such that we won't get derailed or turned away or diminished or even harmed by disasters. And if we plan well and have contingencies in place, we're going to be in a better shape than if we don't have plans. Really, business continuity is about designing your business to keep moving. It's about maintaining revenue, continuing to deliver your service, recovering your tools that you use, if that's hardware and software and network, being able to access your data wherever you're at because of the disaster, supporting your own team of employees and staff, increasing communication both internally and externally. It's really important to have a good handle on messaging both on a marketing side and a client side and a staff side. Also adjusting your plans and making new plans. And I think that there's been a lot of interesting opportunities for inventing new offers and new strategies. I've been very impressed with several of my clients that have come up with entirely new services in the last 2 months because they needed to. And my firm itself, we've had to pivot and do a lot of things that we usually do in new ways. So that's kind of the plus side of business continuity, is that with plans in place, we have an opportunity to take advantage of hard times in some interesting ways. I also want to say that a lot of this stuff is about data. So all those points I just made, accessing your computer and your business data is really important. Next, I want to talk about types of disasters. And at this point, David, I want to see if you can go ahead and launch the poll. If you could let us know who you're at, who you are by participating in this poll on your screen. There's 4 questions there. How big is your firm size? How often were you working remotely before? And also, what email platform and what CAD BIM tools do you use? So yeah, let us know let us know who you are. That helps us as we go. So I want to talk about types of disasters, and the first category is often physical disasters, and those are the ones that we think of most. They're not necessarily the most likely. Technology disasters are a lot more likely, actually. Marketplace or market disasters, financial, and people. So those are the 5 categories I'm going to kind of touch on today as we think about disaster planning. The physical disasters are really what we most think of. Earthquakes here in the Bay Area, certainly a possibility. It seems like my whole life growing up here, they've been saying, in the next 10 years, there will be the big one. And that seems to be a rolling forecast. Fire is certainly one. I haven't had any clients, knock on wood, have offices burn. Flooding, also, I have had some severe water damage of clients. Major theft is a real possibility. We've seen that even in the last 12 months. Vehicle disasters, if your company has vehicle-related ones. Technology disasters is the one that we often specialize in, but what we're going to see is a lot of these other kinds of disasters impact technology. So hardware failure is classic, software failure certainly, system corruption like Windows or Apple, operating system corruption. Hardware theft is a technology of disaster. I think this is the old school cybercrime. The picture on the right here is one of my clients last year had their office door drilled out, and the bad guys reached their hand in, unlocked their deadbolt. They didn't have an alarm, and they, for 4 hours in the middle of the night, carted out everything, including the servers, the desktops, the laptops, the video cameras, the hardware, the networking, and also the backups. So all of it was taken, and that was definitely a disaster. Data theft is another issue that we see in technology. This can be people grabbing data on accident or on purpose. Cyber attack is one that we talked about in the cybercrime webinar. Cyber attack is an issue that all companies, large and small, have to deal with. We're all actually being attacked every day. We're not being successfully attacked, but that is an ongoing issue for all businesses every day. And the motive is money. Data breach is defined as data that is stolen from you that is of a special kind, which is either personally identifying or financial information or healthcare information. So Target's credit card data breach a few years ago is an example of that. Most of our clients aren't really at risk of data breach on a large scale, but we all have some information that's valuable. So data loss is what it's all about there for all of those. For marketplace disasters, there's economic ones, certainly the global, national, state, local economies, industry-specific things, even like the subtleties of construction stop, a month or so ago, and the impact that had on all of my architecture clients. Competition is a type of market disaster. You can be either ruled obsolete or a competitor can overtake you. Reputation hits in the marketplace can be a disaster. Relevance to your offers can change dramatically over time. I used to say that the rubber stamp business, became irrelevant a long time ago, and the rubber stamp companies that learned to pivot into new products survived, and those that did not, went away. Intellectual property also, both in theft and then also kind of a ubiquity of approach. So again, all of those items are adding the global pandemic this year. That I had a hard time knowing which category to put global pandemic in, so I chose marketplace, but it certainly overlaps with all of them. Financial disasters include lost revenue, lost clients, lost assets, fraud, phishing attacks is this type of cybercrime that we've seen happen. Ransomware. None of our clients, knock on wood, have been victims of ransomware, but I think that's because we were doing a great job of preventing it. But it's one of the top 2 threats to all businesses right now, and it's a financial threat. And lawsuits is the other big one. So people disasters. I put a picture up there of a guy it's actually a guy painted on the front of the bus, but it's the illustration of the hit by bus scenario. I've heard of it as a joke over time. Oh, what if Dave gets hit by a bus? What if the business owner gets hit by a bus? And just a year ago, March, my company was doing some disaster planning, as we do, and the Dave gets hit by a bus scenario was discussed. And I kid you not, 3 days later, on my birthday last year, my car was hit by a bus with me in it. And thankfully, I wasn't hurt, but I just couldn't help but laugh and share with my team that that scenario played out. And I'm hoping that because it happened once to me, it will never happen again in terms of likelihood. But yeah, the hit by buses. But what happens if a key leader becomes deathly ill or is dies suddenly? How does the business continue? There's certain kinds of HR exposures which could be playing into reputation, could play into lawsuits, could play into things like harassment or just difficult situations on the HR can prove to be disasters. Staff loss unexpectedly. One time I had 3 employees leave within a month. That was really tough. Human error is in the category of people. It's not at all ill-intentioned, but mistakes happened, and it leads to significant impact. And then also identity theft. This is kind of what happens when social security numbers of key employees or clients or the firm gets stolen. My company has been dealing with, in the last 2 years, with a company in Miami that's using our name and doing some disreputable business and marketing practices. And so I'm having to work very hard to keep my business identity clear. So again, business continuity is everything. And as we go through this, please do ask questions as I talk through the slides, and there'll be some time at the end as well for questions. I did want to share that we're about a third on firm size today. So the small firm 1 through 10 is a third of you, 11 through 25 employees is a third, and the 26 and above is a third. Also, it looks like 85% of you never or rarely worked remotely before COVID-19. So that's pretty interesting. 50-50 on the AutoCAD and Revit, and it looks like a majority of folks are on Microsoft Office 365. So thought I would share those results with you. I wanted to get to one of the 2 key parts of this presentation. I think the slides I've been kind of going over before, it's pretty easy to brainstorm types of disasters, and the real key is how do we plan for it? What is a methodology that is useful for us as small and medium businesses to go through and to basically be better protected, better anticipating the future? And so this ArcSource disaster planning process is something I did not invent it, but I put it in these words in these 6 points about 5 years ago. And so, really, as I've been advising clients to go through it and going through it myself, It comes down to these 6 points, and I'm going to go through them one at a time for you. But really, compiling information and communications planning is really important up front. Also, really outlining what it is that you have to protect against in a disaster is really important. And then fourth one there is I think key, because all the slides before I think can be overwhelming. The numbers of possible disasters can be overwhelming. Really doing a prioritized assessment of our risk is the way to do it, and I'll show you how to do that here in a second. And then I definitely recommend making an action plan and training your team and updating it regularly. So moving into the first part, which is compiling contacts. Really, in a disaster is the last time you want to go looking for phone numbers and email addresses. So make lists of your leadership team, your staff, the family members of staff, their emergency contacts. If you have an employee file or employee emergency form, definitely recommend scanning that and making sure you have available to that in a secure cloud. If you don't have such a form or you haven't updated it in many years, definitely recommend doing that. Creating an emergency team. You know, who in your company, the 1 or 2 people are going to be involved in handling an emergency as it might roll out. You definitely want to be in touch with your landlord, your utilities, your IT services provider. They're almost going to be always involved in an IT or other type of disaster. Insurance information and contacts is key, as well as legal, and also your other vendors. So if you have lists of these folks, it's going to be possible to do step 2, which is create a communications plan. So it's really important that you control your messaging, both internally and externally. You want to communicate with your leadership team first and talk about the issues at hand, talk about things with your staff, then with your clients, and then with your vendors. I really do recommend doing it in that order. As we found out with COVID-19, as things were coming down very quickly, we also found it very helpful to have kind of a short-term, medium-term, long-term communication plan for each of these types of folks. So let me know if you have questions. But the next piece here, I want to talk about outlining the systems that you need to protect and also the data that you need to protect. Because as we're going to see, the company data and company technology and company communication tools, not only are they important for current operations, or even pre-pandemic operations, they're even more important during a disaster. And in the current situation as we're rolling out through a multi-month, work from home scenario. And also it's super important for business continuity to survive. So servers, desktops and laptops, mobile devices, email services, you got to have protection there. Voice services, you need to have a plan for your phones. Cloud services of all kinds that you use, whether it's Google or Microsoft or Salesforce or Revit, AutoCAD, BIM 360. Your accounting and HR data is of particular special importance. Your website and marketing content is very valuable. Your core business applications, whatever that might be in terms of software. It could also be intellectual property that you own, and also licensing. License information, especially for software and hardware, is really key for both insurance proceedings and also for getting back up and running. And I would also throw in there kind of important documents like legal documents, corporate documents, it's stuff like that, leases, pink slips. So the disaster risk assessment that I like to do is, it's actually pretty simple, but it's very powerful. So the first thing that you want to do is list out all the types of possible disasters and their likelihoods. And so I like to joke that a tornado or a hurricane is unlikely here in California, but it would be high impact if it happened. You also want to be really thinking about the much more likely non-catastrophic disasters. And so maybe these are disasters in quotation marks, but the non-catastrophic loss is really a lot more likely scenario. So what I recommend doing is on your list, and you can do a spreadsheet, and I'm going to show one on the next slide. Basically rate the probability of each disaster. And this doesn't have to be scientifically based. This has to be according to your sensibilities. You know, global pandemic was not on my radar. I would have ranked at a 1 before this year. Now I'd still rank at a 2. But then after you rank the probabilities, also rank the impacts, and I'll show you what this looks like. And then the next step is you really want to calculate risk. And the definition of business risk is multiplying probability times impact. So probability of a disaster type happening times the business impact. That's how you're going to determine risk. And what that allows you to do is to sort your list that you just come up with high to low. And then you can begin the process of making your emergency plan. So, and then I added this bullet point this morning. I would like to encourage / challenge / throw down an invitation to all of you. If you're on this webinar, I would invite you to spend 2 hours this week on this exercise of disaster planning that we're talking about here today. So you probably can't finish it in 2 hours this week, but I tell you what, if you go through 2 hours this week, you will be so much better prepared than you were if you hadn't. And then you can make a point to spend time, an hour a week or in a couple hours a month going forward. So this is an example of the risk assessment that I did for this slide. First of all, I put earthquake, you know, pretty low likelihood in my sensibility of it. Massive theft, I still think it's pretty low with alarms, but it's just huge impact, right? So really low, medium low likelihood, but a high impact. Ransomware, I think, is much more likely than an earthquake or a massive theft event. I think its impact is probably a 4 for most businesses. In my case, I'm feeling pretty good about my ransomware protection, so maybe I'd rate it a 3, but for most businesses, I'd rate it as a 4. Server crash, you know, it's probably a hair more likely than an earthquake, but I was forcing myself to be 1 through 5. And again, in my case, a server crash would be pretty medium to medium low impact. Tornado, again, very low likely, very high likelihood, a very high impact. I actually have a colleague that does IT services for medical practices in Missouri. And there was a Joplin, Missouri tornado a few years ago, right after I met him, or right before I met him. And he had himself 100% physical loss of his company, and 70% of his clients had 100% physical loss of everything in their business. So again, tornado unlikely, earthquake more likely. I do think the global pandemic is more likely than a tornado, and I put the impact as not as severe though. But that's kind of an adjusted assessment as I've gone forward. Anyway, in this, you know, kind of 6 quick examples, you know, I came up with a ransomware as being the highest risk disaster that I should plan for. And I would encourage you to come up with 20 or 30 scenarios that come to the top of your head or in these different categories. The next slide is prioritize action plan. So basically, if you make a plan and you prepare and you practice it, you're going to be in better shape. That's what that graphic suggests. My suggestion is after you've sorted the list of risky disasters, start at the top, start at the most likely, and come up with a list of triggering events. And a triggering event, I like to say, is a specific incident that might happen. For example, well, earthquake of 7.0 or higher might be a good example, or a theft of greater than $10,000 of equipment. So put some numbers to it, but definitely cause it as a trigger, because not every earthquake is a disaster and not every theft is a disaster. But do some thought around that. I definitely recommend looking at physical safety first, if that's appropriate, and especially in those physical disasters. Can also be important in people disasters. Then go to staff communication second. Your team is counting on you as leaders. So physical safety first, then staff communication, then client communication third. And then I recommend going to some financial adjustments. So there was a lot of folks that were, shifted their posture on cash expenditures when the coronavirus hit. Totally understandable. Making adjustments with line of credit, financial adjustments like the PPP loan that many of us did. Financial adjustments are really high priority, but I still put people first above that. And then we go to the money side. And after that, we want to look at facilities and tools on a temporary basis. After that, we want to look at a replacement. So in the case of a catastrophic loss, we're going to need to have short-term, immediate-term, temporary stuff, and then we're going to have to begin a kind of a long-term journey of replacement. So thinking of it in short-term, medium-term, long-term, I find is very helpful. But also just kind of, the most important thing for business continuity is to get folks working. And then, long-term systems and data restoration. I have an assumption that tools like communication are going to be survive a disaster. I think Google and Microsoft email are going to survive a disaster. They've built their companies, that are much bigger than all of ours in a way to make sure that happens. So, in the example of my friend who had a tornado wipe out his town, what they did is they immediately started ordering computers in other states that they could have shipped to addresses outside of the tornado zone. And then they had all of their team go set up and work in Starbucks and McDonald's and libraries to get on the internet and be working. I think right now with our smartphones, we have a huge ability to communicate even in the event of a disaster, even in the event of a massive disaster. I also recommend scanning your key documents. This is part of planning. You're going to want to have all the things like your insurance policies, your leases, your titles, your promissory notes, your employment contracts, your customer and client contracts. If you're not in the practice of scanning these now, definitely send me an email and would happily make some recommendations of strategies to organize digital record keeping. Okay, and then really a key point of planning is backing up everything. And the next part of the conversation is going to be about that. So training your team, I definitely recommend creating an emergency playbook document. I have a worksheet. If you're interested, definitely email me and let me know kind of a worksheet checklist for creating a document. Also, just want to say it's a continuous process. And I think sometimes we approach business planning or disaster planning or major document writing like employee handbook as a huge, monstrous task. And my suggestion, and I know from painful experience, is just work on it in layers. And 2 hours of effort this week is way better than no hours of effort this year, right? So be willing to get started, get willing to work it on it in chunks. Include all the above concepts that we've just been talking through. I do recommend reviewing disaster planning with your leadership team quarterly. Another idea is to review it with your team monthly as just a bullet point on your staff meeting agenda, but I definitely recommend reviewing it with all staff at least annually. Okay. So yeah, monthly snippet approach. Okay. So one of the things that I want to talk about now has to do with backup. And do let me know if you have questions. What we've seen is that, again, all these disaster types are going to overlap with our technology tools, partly because of modern business, partly because of modern communication. But business continuity and the way that we, as small businesses, make money is heavily reliant on access to our data and access to our tools. And this is a picture of a friend of mine named Scott. And I once had an idea that I would write a book about backup. And he told me nobody will ever buy a book about backup, Dave, because everybody's in denial. And I think maybe he was right. And I also think that people are aware of being in denial. And I think this is a good time to come out of denial a bit. So I want to talk a little bit about backup concepts for you guys briefly before we wrap up at the end. We're currently at 12:35, so definitely let me know if you have questions as we roll through, and there'll be time for questions at the end. So 70% of businesses fail within 12 months of a total data loss, which is scary. And I've actually seen that happen. The neighbor of mine that I showed with that door cut out earlier, they actually went out of business within 90 days. They were not one of my clients, but they were one of the neighbors in my office building. And I've seen another couple clients have impacts like that, and other business owners. Basically, we're currently piling up a lot more data because storage is piling up high. Also, the failure rate of backup tapes, I don't know if anybody's using tape backup anymore, but 100% failure. Same with hard disks, 100% failure. So we need to plan for the lifespan of our backup systems.
Dave, we do have a question coming in.
Yeah. Okay.
Question is, do you have an example of the emergency playbook document?
I do. I have a couple of templates that I can share if folks email me, and I'll put my email address at the end. Yeah. So when my company takes on a new client, I found that 60% of them have no automated backup in place, which is pretty shocking. 85% of our new clients are not backing up all their data, which is also pretty shocking. And we're finding 100% of our new clients need a refined approach to backup and business continuity. So I actually have a lot of horror stories I can share with you. I just mentioned the summer clean out example. I've never had a building burned down. I had a new client that I met the week after Thanksgiving who had their entire office cleaned out over the Thanksgiving weekend. I've had a sewage leak on top of a server. I've had laptop thefts with critical information. I've seen laptops fall in the bay, literally. I've also seen just the need to go back in time to old information is a key data loss type. So Timing is everything for data loss. Hardware failure is 39%. Human error is 30%. Software problems, 13%. Theft is 8%. And virus infection is 7%. And that leaves only 3% of them being a site disaster or a catastrophic loss. And what that means is that 97% of the situations where we're going to see data loss are from the non-catastrophic loss scenarios. And that's why planning for things that are much more likely to happen is super duper important. Okay, so there's two old questions that we used to see as we designing backup systems. One of them was, how much data are you willing to lose? And people would answer that in days or weeks sometimes. And also another one is, how long are you willing to be down for? If you have a physical or even a non-catastrophic loss, you know, if you have a server failure, how long you're willing to be down. And what I've liked to do is take those two questions off the table. Old school backup was all about servers and files, occasional backups, tape rotations, weekly or monthly, hard disk rotations, and occasionally checking on the system. The assumption that only servers have valuable data is not true. The assumption that it's okay to lose your operating systems is not true. As long as you have your files, you're okay. That's not true. The assumption that it's okay to lose 1 or 2 weeks of data is not true. And that it's okay to be down for a long time, not true. So I like to say everything has changed in this disaster planning and backups. First of all, data is everywhere. It's more valuable than ever. There's a huge amount of new technology in this space. Cloud storage costs are decreasing and internet speeds are increasing. And what that means is that because our data has value, we have an opportunity to protect it better than ever before. So I've done some effort at quantifying the value of your data. And I think some of you guys have seen this even as we had COVID-19. You know, a 5-person firm productivity cost is at least $500 an hour. That can be opportunity cost only. That can be opportunity cost plus labor cost. A large, 70+ person firm could be burning $7,500 an hour. And I tell you that almost all backup solutions cost less than these 1 hour increments. But a weekly loss, if you have a backup, is $24,000. For a larger firm, it's over $250,000. So facing the reality of the value of your data and the ability to get productive is really important as you consider disaster planning. In terms of business continuity, there's basically two key things. One of them is called RPO, which stands for Recovery Point Objective, and RTO, which talks about Recovery Time Objective. So we want to figure out how much lost data from our last backup to the disaster point, and then we want to find out how much time between the disaster point and recovery time. And of course, our goal is to bring those two stars, those 2 points, closer and closer to each other, to the very disaster itself. So my current plan is 0 lost data for all of my clients, and which, that didn't used to be the case 10 years ago even. We were settling for lost data of days or weeks, and now we're at the point we have 0 lost data as a plan. And recovery time, we've been able to move from weeks to days to hours, even to minutes for certain types of data loss. So again, modern stuff makes business continuity sail much better. I like to say that every backup system has 4 parts: hardware, software, people, and process. And also that every backup system has a weak link. And the weak link could be the hardware, it could be the software, the people, or the process. I once had a client that was dutifully changing the backup media every day without fail, but they never noticed the software error on the screen. This is back when we let our clients manage their own backups. And so self-managed backup is usually going to run into a people or a process issue. Um, my suggestions for keys to successful backups as a component of disaster planning is get out of denial, get started right away, separate your backup and your archive functions. A lot of people confuse the two. I had a client once that was archiving their projects onto tape, and then they were using the same tapes to back up their current data, and they were erasing the tapes every month. So by confusing archive and backup, they actually had data loss. Also, not all data is created equal, just like not all disasters are created equal. I highly recommend identifying your critical data and ranking it and protecting it in multiple ways. Also, critical systems. Your email platform is much more important than, say, your sales and marketing solution. Both are important, but your email communication platform is much more so. And then we recommend backing up everything. We now recommend backing up hardware and software and backing up the cloud. We definitely recommend backing up on-site to hardware with redundancy. So a bunch of firms that I've run into lately that are not my clients have been backing up off-site only to the cloud. And really, the problem with that is that it doesn't take care of 97% of the scenarios. So on-site backup lets you handle 97% of the data loss scenarios, much more high performance, much more quickly, with much less time. Also, backing up to offsite locations is really that kind of 3% insurance policy for the total catastrophic loss. You got to be checking your backups every day. If that sounds boring or annoying to you, you probably need a service to do it for you. Performing test restores. We're doing test restores and monitoring of our clients' backups every day, every week. Also, really important to maintain the hardware and the software and the cloud services that are used in your backups. Those things have to be updated just like your actual systems. It's also very important to choose technologies that are not vulnerable to ransomware. I had a colleague that had 8 servers encrypted by ransomware, and their backups were also encrypted, so they had to pay $40,000 ransom. Yeah, and then documentation. So the way we do manage backup is with ArcSource Managed Backup. We supply hardware, software, people, and process in the scenario. I wanted to show you a couple of examples of that. First of all, backing up to the cloud. Even if you're not an ArcSource client, I'm happy to share with you what I think are the best picks. One of them is called Backblaze. This is really good for individual laptops and desktops that you need to back up to the cloud. I think a lot of people ask me about Apple's iCloud and Apple's Time Machine software. And we think that those are great secondary backups, but because they're not manageable and not reportable and not auditable, we can't rely on them for full managed backups. Backblaze, a company called Datto that we highly recommend, has some great endpoint backup. Company called Mosey, and also Carbonite. you definitely want to choose those that are centrally manageable technologies as well. Let me know if you have any questions in this space. We also now recommend it, backing up of the cloud. So now that almost all the people in this webinar are on hosted email platform, most commonly Microsoft, at least for the folks on the webinar today, or Google. Those are the top two in the world. We actually trust Google and Microsoft not to lose our data. We trust Google and Microsoft not to go down and be unavailable. The problem that we have is that we can't rely on people. And this doesn't mean we can't trust people in general. It means that people make mistakes. People make assumptions. People get busy. And the number one cause of email data loss and cloud data loss is accidental or on purpose actions of people. So Google and Microsoft will cover you for 30 days, but if someone in your firm deleted important files 75 days ago, there's no way you're going to get that back unless you have the cloud backed up as well. So we have a couple of great platforms that we recommend. The one we like the most is called Backupify. It backs up Google's G Suite, Office 365, and also Salesforce. We also recommend backing up your website data. You can't really count on your web host to do so. And fifthly we definitely recommend taking backups of your cloud-based accounting services if you use QuickBooks Online or any of the hosted architecture-specific accounting packages. And lastly, we recommend backing up the BIM 360 cloud models. And there's a few methodologies that Autodesk has given us to do that. So let me know if you have questions there. For server disaster recovery, we recommend a hybrid on-site and cloud approach. Files-only backup is no longer adequate. The technology we recommend is from this company called Datto. And what we do is we put an appliance at our client's office, and the entire server, operating system, memory, databases, programs, plus all of its data is backed up every day, all day. And then that appliance ships that data off to the cloud. So this approach allows us to have the 97% solution for backup if you have data loss without catastrophic loss. And it also allows us, if there's a catastrophic loss, to have your server come to life in the cloud. So just 2 months ago, we had a client suffer a server hardware catastrophic loss. Well, it's not catastrophic to the building. So a really bad server hardware failure. And we were able to spin them up on the Datto appliance about 20 minutes later once we realized what happened. So business continued completely seamlessly with that small gap. The next thing is, I guess that was my last slide. So I want to open it up for questions at this point and talk through both the disaster planning aspect in that methodology, types of disasters, and then also if you have questions on backup strategies, be happy to answer them for you. And then while I have you here, again, this is the same slide I showed at the top of the hour, which is the next several webinars we have: 2 in June, 2 in July, and 2 in August. So who has some questions? Looks like I know about 1/3 of the folks on the webinar as ArcSource clients, and 1/3 of you are not. If you don't have any questions, we can definitely wrap up a few minutes early. I hope this has been valuable. Please do email me also at dave@arcsource.com if you have any questions, or if you'd like information on any of the topics that we talked about today. Also, if you'd like a copy of my slide deck from today, happy to give that out and email you a PDF of it. And we've also been creating videos of these webinars, and we have now our library of 5 webinars that we've done so far in the month of May. So, any questions while we're out there, Dave?
No questions yet.
Okay. This is a deep, important, geeky topic. I think it's really important to handle well, get out of denial. We definitely realize that there's a lot of options out there. So I definitely think it's worth taking the time to invest in disaster planning, and then also strategic backup planning. Okay.
No questions.
No questions. All right. Well, hopefully this was valuable to you guys. I enjoyed talking through it. Looking forward to connecting with you guys next month. If you're on our mailing list or the AIASF's mailing list, you'll definitely be hearing about these webinars as they come up in the future. Okay. So I will stop sharing my screen, but stay on here in case there's anybody else that does have some questions. Also going to show the results of the polls for the firm size. And all right, so at this point, unless there's any other questions, I'm going to go ahead and say we'll pause or stop the webinar broadcast now. And thank you guys for joining us.